Hello, greetings everyone on this beautiful Sunday on September the 17th of 2023. So I started kind of late to be honest because I had forgot that I was going to go live, but I'm here. So today's topic is going to be about Bertha Gilkey. Bertha Gilkey was an African American activist, and she also focused on public housing in St. Louis. So her main thing was to represent the tenants of those public housing, right? And the reason why public housing is very important because many of us grew up in those type of homes, and also we had we make up the majority of the population, those individuals who lived in those environments. So by African Americans being at the lowest of the income when it comes to income ranges, right? And having a hard time finding housing, many of our people, our ancestors, settled on public housing because that's what they could really afford. They couldn't afford to live in very nice places, live in suburbs and things of that nature. All right. So this is one of the reasons why I'm speaking on the subject, because there's not enough exposure when it comes to African Americans being involved in the housing authority development, as far as making sure or fighting for adequate resources, fighting for better housing condition or whatnot. And most of these people that was a part of the activism when it came to this were African American women, black women. They was mostly fighting for this because many of them lived in public housing. So it was only fair, right? And there's so many lists of names out there that we don't even know about. So I believe that this is very important. And then people also got this preconceived notion that black women didn't really put too much activism into the black community or didn't really do anything as far as uplifting the people is concerned. And that's where the information becomes false. All right. So I want to introduce you guys to Bertha Gilkey and how did I come across? Well, I actually seen someone's TikTok and they had mentioned her. They posted one of her videos up, and so I said, well, this is very interesting. Let me look up more into detail about this woman so I can share it with the people. And so I decided to look up the information. I've been wanting to do it for a while, but I had postponed it, focusing on other things. However, I said, well, let me just go ahead and look into this information and share it with the people because it's very important that we need to know this. So I'm going to make sure it's my business that I give more exposure and put more focus on African American women or just the women throughout the diaspora. You know what I'm saying? Normally I do it on Women's History Month, but I'm going to try to focus more on that whenever I do my videos, because I really want people to see that there has been black women who have made contribution, and we have to get out this preconceived notion that black women have not did anything as far as society is concerned. You know, because there's so much stereotype going on around black women when it comes to media, and we have to dispel the myth. We have to break those stereotypical concept that's been put out there, those social stigmas. All right. Anyways, I don't want to talk too much, so let's go ahead and get started. So, who was she and what did she do? What was her purpose? Okay. So, here's the information. And then I have a book that I want to share with you guys that deals with public housing and black women as far as activism. I want to share some, sources from the book. All right. So, here's the information here. And this can be found on WikiOne. Public housing activist. That's what she was. And this is a picture of her right here. Okay. In 1987. So Bertha Gilkey was an African American activist of tenant management of public housing properties. She set up the first tenant management association in St. Louis, Missouri, which successfully rehabilitated the once decrepit Cochrane Gardens public housing project and managed it for more than 20 years. All right. So according to her own statement, Gilkey was born in bitter poverty in Arkansas. Emma Green, her mother, relocated to St. Louis in 1960 and raised her 15 children in a three-bedroom apartment at Cochrane Gardens, the first high-rise project of St. Louis, financed through the Housing Act of 1949, completed in 1953. Initially intended for low-income whites, the 704-unit blocks was desegregated in 1956. Emma Green and her children were among its first black tenants. So it says when Cochrane was all white, they didn't refer to it as a project. It was called Cochrane Gardens. As Cochrane's became more and more black, I began to see the services reduced. Once it became all black, there was no standards. It moved from being a neighborhood to a project. It became a dumping ground. All right. So it says in 1969, Gilkey, then a 20-year-old divorced mother of two who called herself a Black Panther, led a 9-month rent strike of some 22,000 public housing tenants against mismanagement of municipal agency and the intolerable living condition of St. Louis high-rise ghetto, Puri Ego, and Cochrane Gardens, and the like. The city replaced its housing authority board after 6 more years of activism, Bertha Gilkey succeeded in persuading the city of St. Louis to surrender management of Cochrane Gardens to an independent tenant management association. By this time, Puri Ego had already been torn down, and Cochrane Gardens, nicknamed Little Nam, had already been slated for demolition. Her mother, ex-husband, and siblings eventually left Cochrane for better places, but Gilkey preferred to stay. All right, so let's go back to where it stated that once it became all black, there was no standards. It moved from a neighborhood to a project. It became a dumping ground. So let's look at that for a moment. Let's have that conversation around that. So eventually, a lot of these public housing projects, right? When they was first built in America, it was intended for white people. Then later, there was some built for African Americans. So as I mentioned in some of my videos about Techwood, Techwood was the first housing project built in America under the federal government funding. It was the first public housing project that was built around 1930s, around 1934. And it was intended for white residents. And then University Homes became the second housing project that was built in America, but the first housing project that was built for African Americans. Okay, so remember, these public housing was not always for African Americans. It was segregated at one point. So there was some that was built for white people, and there was some that was built for African Americans and others. However, eventually, as more and more white people start to accumulate more wealth and they start to get all these high paying jobs, they moved up out the areas, right? Once the GI Bill came into existence, right? Once they qualified for loans, they was able to move out these housing projects and move into the suburban community. Whereas African Americans or black people, they moved into those areas. Now, I'm not a fan of Yvette Carnell, but one thing she did say, we don't have access to capital. And that's true. We do not have access to capital because of our history here in this country. But white people, they have access to capital. We don't. So that means it's much harder for us to get business loans. It's much harder for us to find adequate housing. And not to really get off subject, there was an article that was put out where a black couple was trying to sell their home, but the property value was low and they was unable to do so. So they went on ahead and had a white couple stand in front of the same house they were trying to sell, and the appraisal, which is the property value, done went up because of the white couple. So what you're dealing with is institutional racism. Now we like to think that, well, time done change and people don't act on racism as much as they used to anymore. It's still there. The principles are still there. The practices is still there. It's through economical practice. You will see it more economically than you will see it socially. I mean, think about why you think that people ain't trying to get rid of capitalism. Because if you got rid of capitalism, that means that you have to change the whole social status of every group in America. And not only that, that means people will have to give up their financial status. And certain groups are not willing to do that. They're not willing to sacrifice that. That's why you got people like Jane Elliott, for example, that oppose reparation. Why is that? Because she know that with reparation, that means a certain group of people got to give up their status. Because when we look at the cost of reparation, right, and we see how much money is owed to us here in America, yeah, of course that's going to make the dominant group want to turn away. Of course that's going to make white people not want to be bothered. No, they ain't going to want to support that. Because you know why? They have benefited the wealth off of our ancestors in this country. Capitalism created generational wealth for them, whereas capitalism brought about slavery for our people. I'm going to say it again. Capitalism brought about generational wealth to the European, whereas capitalism brought about slavery and oppression to our people. Think about that. But let's go ahead and continue. Let's go ahead and continue. All right. All right, then let's go ahead. So basically, it says the Cochran Tenant Management Corporation became the first of its kind in St. Louis. In short time, the new management rehabilitated Cochran Gardens into a relatively safe and comfortable place. So since 1978, the complex was modernized and outfitted with new engineering system, owing both to Gilkey's fundraising skills and to Cochran's nearly downtown location that could not be ignored by city and federal authorities. So by 1992, Cochran received $33 million in federal aid, twice as much as the second-ranking St. Louis project. Gilkey personally managed the staff that reached 47 in 1991. Only at this point did Gilkey hire a professional manager and accountant to run the operation. She was not ever paid a salary at Cochran, according to a 1992 source, making a living with consultancy and paid public speaking. Her experience fell in accord with the Republican campaign for deregulation and changing the rule of welfare administration. So Gilkey, among other activists, was invited to join Ronald Reagan as he signed the Housing and Community Development Act of 1987. And we'll take a look at that in a moment, but let's read this. It says, join me are three of our national heroes of the tenant management movement. Kimmy Gray of the Kenilworth Parkside Residence Management Corporation here in Washington, D.C., Bertha Gilkey of the Cochran Tenant Management Corporation in St. Louis, Mildred Haley, the founder of the tenant management movement at the Bromley Heath Tenant Management Corporation in Boston, and they remind us that ownership or control of one's own residence should be an opportunity for every citizen. So that came from Ronald Reagan on February the 5th of 1988. Now let's look at the bill that he done signed. All right. So what is the Housing and Community Development Act of 1987? So it is a United States federal law which amend the Housing and Community Development Act laws with regards to the Housing Act of 1937. The amendment revised sections of Act concerning community and neighborhood development, family and single housing, and preservation for low-income homeowners. So the law provided insurance for FHA, home equity conversion mortgage, better known as home equity conversion loan or reverse mortgages, right? So it says, Title 6 of the Act established the Nehemiah Housing Opportunity Grants Program, intended to encourage home ownership by making federal grants to nonprofit organizations who would in turn loan funds to low-income families purchasing homes being built or rehabilitated under an approved program. So NHOP ceased operation in 1991 when it was repealed by Section 289 of the Cranston-Gonzalez National Affordable Housing Act of 1990. So the Section 825 legislation was passed by the 100th U.S. congressional session and signed into law by the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, on February 5th, 1988. All right, so to break that down, if y'all can see me, okay, let me zoom out. So basically, if you know, there are some people that own homes, right, that's under HUD, which is the Housing Urban Development. And the reason why they was able to do so was because of this act. Okay. So those people was living in low income range, right? They was under the low income range. However, instead of having the option to live in public housing, they had the option to own to live in homes that is owned by the federal government or owned by HUD, right? So they didn't have to pay that much in mortgage. So there was a way that their mortgage was I cannot even come up with the word. But anyways, there was a way their mortgage was, it was balanced out. Let's put it like that. So the mortgage was able to, so the housing authority, right, was able to work with those low income individuals to make it where they didn't have to pay that much in mortgage. Okay. All right. So at one point in time, people didn't have that opportunity to get homes while they was on Section 8. Right. But but after a while, they were able to find houses, actual homes in decent community while they're under Section 8. Now today is not really so much because the cost of living is going up and the property value has went up. So those who are under Section 8 housing, they will have a hard time finding a decent home because there's not too many houses that's ran by the housing authority, and there's not too many places that will accept the Section 8. Or let's just say, like, if they was renting a home, right, they can use their Section 8 to, get a home that they rent off of, you know what I'm saying? So it'll make it where the federal government will pay a portion to the landlord while the tenant will pay a certain amount, which usually be a cheaper amount, right? So as long as they have that Section 8, they don't have to pay that much to the landlord. Okay. But here's the catch. Most landlords don't like taking people who got Section 8. They don't like dealing with those who have Section 8 vouchers. Why? Because they're not going to make as much money. So that means that they have to make some changes as far as how much they can charge for rent under those guidelines. So most landlords would rather not deal with or take individual who have Section 8 housing or Section 8 housing. My bad. Landlords rather not take individual who have Section 8 vouchers. All right. Because that means that they're not going to get as much money. Because they feel like this: if you can't afford to pay the rent here, then you don't need to be here. So, and that's the catch. All right. So that's the catch. So nowadays, you're not going to find too many people having houses while they on Section 8 in this modern time period. It's going to be very hard and difficult for those individuals. It's a very challenging time, and especially when you go to certain cities where there's a lot of commercial recognition, such as New York or LA or Atlanta or Miami, where there's a lot of there's a lot of international recognition, and you got people coming from various places traveling to those cities. It's going to make the cost of living go up, and it's going to be very challenging for those residents in those cities to be able to afford the housing. So, yep. So that's basically the whole thing behind it. So now, so during that time period, when that bill came out in 1987, right? When it was signed by Ronald Reagan, it gave more opportunity for those who was on Section 8 voucher or those in low income range to be able to move in houses as opposed to living in public housing projects. Right? But, oh, shoot. Hold on. All right, so let's go back to the source. All right, so let's go down here. It said Jack Kemp, housing secretary under George H.W. Bush, regularly cited Gilkey in an honor roll of civil rights heroes alongside Abraham Lincoln, saying that tenant property management is one of the most powerful manifestations of revolutionary ideals since 1776. And President George H.W. Bush visited Cochrane Gardens in May of 1991, commending tenants management, and personally Bertha Gilkey and attacking government bureaucracy and the solution of the 1960s. Federal supporters of tenant management did not publicize the fact that most of Cochrane residents remained poor and lived on welfare throughout the decades of Gilkey's tenure. So in 1990, 85% of households were headed by single women. Only 27% of head of households had jobs. So vacancy in 1990 was on par with St. Louis' average of 25%. Gang wars with drive-by shootings resumed in Cochrane in September 1991. Prompting Gilkey to lead a public violence awareness campaign in 1998, city authorities took over Cochrane Gardens, citing tax mismanagement by the tenant association. The buildings rapidly deteriorated under city management. By 1999, the vacancy rate increased from under 10% to one-third. And by the end of 2008, all but one of Cochrane Gardens building have been demolished. Wow. And see, this is what happens. This is what happens when you have those who are in leadership, right, or working in the department. Somebody's gonna always take that money and misuse it, misappropriate the funds instead of putting the funds towards what it needs to go, as far as making sure maintenance is taken care of, making sure there's programs, events that's happening for the community. You always got some individuals that do that. Now, which is one of the personal reasons why I don't join organizations. Because when there's money involved and you have somebody that's greedy and that sees that there's a lot of money, it don't matter what position they in, whether it be a political, social, or religious or spiritual organization, the moment that money is involved or is in the picture, that's where the problem comes in. Because if you trust one particular individual to take care of the funds, right, 8 times out of 10, they're going to pocket some of that money, and then they're going to put a little bit towards what is needed as far as the cause is concerned. But most of that money they're pocketing. And so that's why it's hard to trust organization and join organization when you know that someone who's supposed to be in leadership or who is trusted within that leadership is misusing the funds. So, but let's continue on. Let's see what else. So it says Television Chicago and Deaf. As the co-chair of New York-based National Congress of Neighborhood Women, Gilkey negotiated for government grants helping establishment of tenant management in New York and other cities. She was a subject of 1993 NBC show Fire Up, the Bertha Gilkey story produced by John Singleton. Gilkey played a prominent role in an attempt by the Metropolitan Planning Council in Chicago to implement tenant management in Chicago as a document in a 60-minute documentary, Fire Up, Public Housing is My Home, directed by James R. Martin. The film was seen nationally on public TV or public television in 1989 to 1990. So she passed away on May 25th of 2014 at the age of 65 due to 2-year battle with cancer in Prattville, Alabama. So may she rest in peace. May the ancestor be with her. She has really done tremendous work for the community, and it's really not easy to gather up residents so people can fight for the adequate resources they need. Because a lot of times when you come to the people, especially those who are destituted or in a state of poverty, they start to lose hope. They don't believe in changes because they're so used to being in their current state. So shout out to the sister. She really had done a tremendous work, and there has been so many more that really put their lives on the line for the people. All right, so let's see what else I have available for you guys. All right, so I want to share some more information from another website before I go to this book. So here's this information here from Alliance of Parents and Children for Educational Empowerment Inc.org. Okay. Now down here, what was not mentioned in Wikipedia, it says Bertha was self-employed with Urban Women Incorporation and later worked for the Black Alliance for Education option. Bertha later founded and worked for Alliance for Parents and Children for Educational Option. Okay, so she founded this organization, which website I'm on. And it says Bertha's pride and joy lies within her daughter Yvette Gilkey Schwarford. Bertha loved going to Alabama to spend time with her adorable grandsons Percy and Ricky Jr., whom she loved very much. Bertha enjoyed cooking big soul food dinners for her family, friends, divas, and many godchildren. So Bertha met no strangers, and anyone that she came in contact with, life was forever changed by her warm smile and big heart. Bertha was often heard saying, "My child," as she personally took an interest into every child she met. All right. So later on throughout the years, she had been self-employed with Urban Women Incorporation. All right. She worked for the Black Alliance for Education option, and she worked for the Alliance for Parents and Children for Educational option. All right. So that's that information, and that information wasn't on the Wikipedia source, so I had to go to an outside source. All right. So, anyways, you guys, I have recommended this book before, but I'm gonna recommend it again for a reason. So when we talk about public housing projects or just Section 8 in general, and talk about the work that African American women have contributed when it came to public housing and fighting for whether it was fighting for adequate resources or making sure they was involved in recreational activities, this book right here goes into all of that. So this book is called The Politics of Public Housing, Black Women's Struggles Against Urban Inequality by Rhonda Y. Williams. Okay. And so this book was Hmm. This book came out in 2004. Okay, let's see. So here's one thing that is important in this book. So I want to read an important passage before I go. So it says African American efforts to secure decent home reveal a critical component of Black cultural memory and political desire. Securing better homes had been a central citizenship goal of Black struggle since emancipation, when the federal government failed to fulfill its promise of giving newly free slaves 40 acres. Decades later, in cities, the emergence of the slum gave new meaning and urgency to the desire for better homes. In the 1930s, Black Americans regarded poor housing not only as a threat to their health and safety, but also as a denial of their democratic rights of citizenship, especially since the belief that a good citizen couldn't be produced in slum area had public currency. Black sociologist Ira Day A. Reid wrote that because overcrowded houses were in areas where street cleaning and lighting, paving, sewage, and police protection are sustained, and the inhabitants do not have a fair chance for full citizenship. Again, because overcrowded houses were in areas where street cleaning and lighting, paving, sewage, and police protection are substandard, the inhabitants do not have a fair chance for full citizenship. And why is that? Because they're not seen as valuable, because they are low income. They are the so called minorities. That's why it is. So when you are the so called minority, right, in this country, you're not considered as being as valuable as somebody who is privileged and who has the most generational wealth. Have you noticed that those who are wealthy get treated the best? They get treated with the most respect. They get catered to the most. But those who are in the lower income areas or those who are poor, they're treated like lesser humans. You see it when you go into areas that you see a lot of vagrant people. Vagrant people are homeless people. You see those who are destitute downtown asking for money or whatnot, or they're just walking around. Nobody really cares. Nobody is seen to stop and try to see if they can be helped or give them some form of housing. I mean, you have a few individuals, but as far as the cities are concerned, as far as the mayor, the city council, they don't do much to help these people who are in the streets with nowhere to go. They don't provide homeless shelter for them, but they make sure that they can support the investors, right? The billionaires. And it don't matter what political party they represent. They could be a Democrat or Republican. It don't matter what political party they belong to. They support the investors. And the investors, they get to come and they buy up the low income neighborhoods, which we call that redlining gentrification. They buy up the low income neighborhoods. 20 years prior, 10 years prior, or 25 years prior. And those residents that live in the area, they don't even know what's going on until it happens. So what I'm saying to you, investors can buy up the neighborhood that you live in years before you even know when the demolition is going to take place and when they're going to start putting up property or buildings. Or let's just say they do start building up businesses in the areas. And that's the way that people find out, because they see that, oh, these businesses are taking place. And now they see that everything is going up as far as property taxes. And those small business owners over in the area, they can't afford to continue to run their business or be in operation. They can't even compete. So they forced to close down because they don't have the money to keep the business going. See, it's a dirty game when you deal with politics. That's why people don't need to be so caught up on who's the Republican, who's the Democrat, because it's like two peas in the pot. Two peas in the pot. It don't make a difference what party they represent. This is why you gotta look at the political agendas. But see, the trick is, especially for us as black folks, we've been told to vote Democrat. Vote for one particular party because they say they represent the poor people. And we don't investigate further. We don't ask enough questions. We don't see what their intentions are. And do you know so many corrupted things done happen under Democratic leadership? Have you noticed every city that you go that's predominantly black population, they had corrupted leaderships which was under Democratic Party. So it makes you wonder. It just makes you wonder. Not saying that the Republican Party would be any better. It would probably been just as bad. But we have dealt with so much corruption on the Democratic Party. So now it makes you question, well, is it really worth voting for Democrats? And seeing the continued patterns that happen throughout the years. Every time somebody from a Democratic background is in a position of power or in a position of leadership. Especially if they black. If they black, we definitely see a lot going on under black leadership. So one day I'm gonna do a video about what is black leadership. What does it really mean to have a black leadership? So be on the lookout for that. Because now we gotta start questioning what is black leadership and what does that mean to us. Anyways, y'all, thank you all for watching my videos. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. And also, I want to say this. If you guys want to support the channel, there is a super chat that I have on here. So whenever you guys comment, you can use the super chat if you want to. Or if not, then you can always hit up my Cash App. So here's my Cash App information. Which I'm going to post it up for you guys. So that's my Cash App information if you guys want to support my channel, or if you feel like you want to give some type of contribution. That's totally up to you. But anyways, I hope you guys have a good one and y'all be safe. Until next time, peace and power, elevation be to all you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying deuces. And until next time, all right.